Hello and welcome to my channel. I'll be discussing militias, specifically as they apply to the American tradition. While the concept of militias is as old as ancient Rome, in 107 BC, the American militia tradition really began in 1581. Militias not only served as police forces, but also could be used in emergencies and times of war, particularly in many of our major conflicts. Some examples would be the French and Indian War in 1754, the Pontiac Rebellion in 1763, the Revolutionary War, as you know, which ended around 1781. Then you have the War of 1812. Then you have the Civil War, Indian Wars, Texas Independence, Spanish-American War, and the Mexican-American War. In each of these wars and the times in between, militias would serve in military capacities, but the idea of using militias to aid the military pretty much ended around the time of the Militia Act of 1903, followed by the National Defense Act of 1916. After that, we switched more to a standing army model, where militias were no longer used in support. That included the use of private armies unless they were in a mercenary capacity. What were the Founding Fathers' view of militia? In general, it seems the Founding Fathers looked at the militia as far more necessary to the freedom of their state. This was not only backed up by their own history going throughout their life, like in the case of George Washington serving in the French and Indian War, but also during the Revolutionary War, militias were 1812 militias were very, very necessary, filling in many necessary gaps. In fact, the start of the Revolutionary War would actually happen because of the battles of Lexington and Concord. And it would end up being a militia force that would not only fire the first shots, but also militias forces joining up that would actually chase the British regulars who actually set fire to the powder in Concord, so that local forces would have trouble resupplying in case of conflict arising. Believing that their town was being burned, the militia forces chased the British until the British were able to finally get out of unfriendly lands and back into British-held territory. Continuing on with the Founding Fathers' view, Founding Fathers set limits on our military forces, making where they have to report in and ask for budget. They also set up Posse Comitatus Act, where militaries are standing army is not supposed to operate inside the United States without permission. This goes especially in Washington, D.C. And the fact that militias are mentioned 3 times at least in the U.S. Constitution shows that they are very important. They are referred to in the executive branch under the president's responsibilities and what forces they can use. The Congress, legislative branch, and they're also mentioned in the Bill of Rights. In the Bill of Rights, it is specifically mentioned that the rights of the citizens shall not be infringed because all militia forces are made of common citizenry. They're not professional soldiers, and unless they're adopted during a time of emergency or a time of war, they are independent and voluntary. Now, what are the advantages and disadvantages of a militia? The advantages of militia are they're a local force made of the common citizenry. So even if a nation is at peace, these units, or in some cases armies, as they can be combined when necessary, can keep their own weapons, making them a quick reaction force, allowing them to deal with emergencies without having to wait to resupply or having to upgrade after long periods of decline. The citizen soldier would be responsible for keeping up their own weapons, their own gear. And so this would lower essentially the cost to the government and the local peoples. Also, infrastructure could be set up just in support of the militia, and they would also have local support. One of the advantages of having militia and having a strong tradition of armed citizenry, even after the earlier acts that would get rid of militias as far as a normal military force, were shown in the wars of World War I and World War II, when our military was downgraded during our isolationist era. During this time, you have examples like Sergeant York in World War I, where he was able to, despite being a pacifist originally, when he joined the trenches, earned the Medal of Honor while taking on multiple forces, proving himself to be a crack shot. This tradition would go on when it comes to forces like Marines and others, where people coming into the military would already have the necessary skills to be able to fire accurately. And often these traditions would increase the chances of people joining the military voluntarily when they felt they were needed to protect their nation. During World War II, again, because of isolation of views, we were downgrade our military, and it was because of these military traditions. Many experts would probably agree on would allow us to actually stand up many of our military units at a much faster rate, and in future wars continue to help prepare our young people for stepping into the battlefield and with unexpected emergencies. There are many contraring views on what militias are and their importance. Morally, one could argue they are no different than a standing army. But the fact that our founding fathers trusted them more than our standing army says something. There is even plenty of examples, and I've included them in the images of them backing our militia and the concept of having free citizenry.